So I just got through a process of almost a year of having a growling noise in the front end of this 2006 Chevy Silverado 2500 HD four-wheel drive. Started about last July. This kind of groaning, growling noise coming out of the front end, and I pretty quickly figured out that it had nothing to do with the speed of the motor or what gear it was in. It was strictly related to the speed of the wheels. So the faster the wheels were spinning, kind of the higher the pitch of the growling, it would kick in about 10 miles an hour and continue up to about 40 or 50 miles an hour, and then it would kind of go away. But I had recently had problems with U-joints, and I take long trips, so I was nervous about a noise like that it might cause a failure while I was on one of my trips. So I decided to try to fix it. So I narrowed it down to the front end, and that it was probably in the wheel hubs, the bearings. The wheel hubs on these trucks and most cars have the bearing inside of them. I went to some YouTube videos and did the diagnostics that are shown on there for bearing problems. The obvious one when your bearings are really bad is you jack up the vehicle and you grab the wheel at 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock and you try to shake it. You grab it at 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock and you try to shake it. If there's any play in the bearings, you'll feel it. You'll feel like a clunk as you move that wheel, and that's a dead giveaway that the bearing on that wheel is bad. You got to replace the hub. But I also found out that you don't always get that symptom. When it gets that bad, it's really bad, and you surely have to replace it. But I did that on both sides of my vehicle, and I got no play whatsoever. But the bearings can still be going. So I needed to figure out which side it was coming from. It sounded like it was coming from the driver's side, but these front end noises can be deceiving. I had my wife drive me down the road with my head sticking out the window like a dog, trying to see if I could hear it coming from one side or the other. And it's not a noise that you can really hear from outside the car with all that wind noise and so forth. So that didn't work. I found another video that explained that if the noise changes as you're going down the road and you turn to the left or you turn to the right, that'll tell you which side the problem is on. And so I did that, and when I turned to the left, the noise went away. I'd go straight again, noise would come back. If I turned to the right, the noise would stay there. Okay? Conventional wisdom is that when you turn the car, more weight goes to one side of the car and less weight goes on the other side of the car. So the wheel on the outside of the turn, so if I'm turning to the left, that's the right-hand wheel. If I'm turning to the left, there's more weight on that wheel, and there's less weight on the driver's side wheel. And since the noise went away when I did that, I assumed, and the conventional wisdom says, the problem is on the driver's side, because less weight on the bearing, less noise coming out of the bearing. So I turn to the left, towards the driver's side, car tilts a little bit, more weight on the passenger wheel, less weight on the driver's wheel. And so based on that diagnosis technique, I went to the trouble to replace the driver's side bearing last summer, or last fall, I guess. And not an easy job. Getting the old bearing out is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do on a car. It was awful. There's a bunch of YouTube videos on how to do that. There's special tools for getting that wheel hub out of the socket. But nonetheless, I finally did it. Put the new one in and did a test drive. Absolutely no change. So I was racking my brain, what the heck is going on here? Maybe it's not the wheel bearing, maybe it's the CV joints, or maybe it's something in the differential. And so I continued driving the vehicle to see if I'd get any more hints or any more clues from driving it. The good thing about these kinds of bearing problems, when they're growling, they're not going to fail immediately. You know, it'll take a long time for them to fail. It's just irritating to have that noise. So I did about another 1,600 mile road trip down to Georgia and back. Noise steadily getting stronger, louder. Asked a terrific Mercedes mechanic that I know what he thought. Had my wife ride in the car. I had her tell me where she thought the noise was coming from, and they both said it's the right side. In other words, the passenger side. And even though that completely went against the diagnostic procedure, I already had the hub part, the hub bearing, so I finally bit the bullet and said, well, I'm going to change that one, see what happens. The original one had 140,000 miles on it, so maybe it was going to go eventually anyway. And what did I have to lose? So yesterday I changed it, and sure enough, noise is gone. So it just goes to show you that at least on these Chevy Silverado trucks, growling bearing, it's actually the opposite. You know, the turn test, which makes the noise go away for you know, is the conclusion you draw is actually the opposite. So, right. So I wanted to put that out on YouTube so that other people don't have to go through the thing what I went through, which was replacing the wrong side. And when I finally, one more thing you can do if you're lucky and you've got this growling bearing problem is jack up both wheels and spin the wheels. And if you hear if the noise you hear is different on one side from the other, obviously the side making the noise is where the problem is. But when I did that initially with this vehicle, there was no noise coming out of it when I just spun it by hand. But you can't spin it fast enough to get it up to the speed of the road, and you can't put load on it when you do that. So they just may not make the noise that they make when you're driving the car. This time when I did take the old one off, and spun the bearing, I can hear some growling in there when I spin the bearing now. So when I turn it, you'll hear that's the noise that turns into a growl when you're running at 10 to 50 miles an hour. You know, the problem has gotten worse. So hopefully this video is going to help other people do a correct diagnostic of which side is the problem, and they can fix the problem without changing the wrong side. If you like this video, click like, and please subscribe. I've got some other videos out there as well.